the American Bill of Rights had been to protect an ideal of the way things were already. The Charter of Rights was to create changes in society rather than protect society from changes. Yeah, ours is definitely different from theirs. Like, the American Bill of Rights was based. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not an explicitly Christian document, but the people who wrote it and the ideas behind it were more Christian. And the Bill of Rights, it was really a good thing. And I mean, in many respects, it's a good thing. And it did good things for America until the mid-20th century. What happened in the United States is in the mid-20th century, a new judicial philosophy came into the courts, and especially the Supreme Court. And suddenly, the Supreme Court of the United States started making radical decisions contrary to legal decisions of the past, or the direction of legal decisions in the past. And a couple of the big ones were in 1962 and 1963, there were court decisions, one removing prayer from public schools and the other removing Bible reading from Christians, or not from Christian schools, from public schools. Removing prayer from public schools and removing Bible reading from public schools. Now, for the entire history of the United States until early 1960s, there had been prayer and Bible reading in public schools. That had been the American history. There had been no problem with that. What changed was the judicial philosophy in the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court started using the Bill of Rights in a way different from its intention and different from what had been used before. So the Bill of Rights in the United States has been, in recent decades, been twisted out of shape from what it was supposed to be, but it was originally a good thing. Now, the Charter of Rights is quite different because the Charter was written with specifically a more secular philosophy in mind. Now, Trudeau was looking toward the American Supreme Court, and he liked what the American Supreme Court was doing with the Bill of Rights, because the U.S. Supreme Court was deciding political issues that should otherwise been dealt with, by Congress and the legislatures. In Canada, Trudeau knew that our system was for political decisions to be made by the parliaments and by the legislatures, and he wanted to change that. He wanted to transfer power to the judicial system from the elected representatives. And that was the debate in the 1970s, because that's what Manitoba Premier Sterling Lyon was one of the main reasons he was concerned and opposed to the Charter, was he didn't want that political power transferred. But that was when it comes to the Charter, that was a deliberate consequence of the Charter. It was a deliberate attempt to transfer some political decision-making from legislatures to the court system that we'd never had in our history before. So there is a big difference actually between the Charter and the Bill of Rights in terms of their philosophical backgrounds and their purposes and intents. Well, the Canadians who looked to the United States and wanted to copy the American system were looking at the mid-20th century and later aspects of the American judicial system. They saw what the American Supreme Court was doing from the 1950s onwards, and that's what they wanted in Canada. Like, they didn't want to mirror the Bill of Rights, the earlier period of the Bill of Rights when it was kind of more based on a Christian philosophy. They saw that the American judicial philosophy had changed in the mid-20th century, and they wanted to bring that system into Canada as opposed to the previous American system that was more limited. And actually, if I could just add to that a little bit, this is kind of just a general theoretical thing, but the American constitutionalism with the Bill of Rights in the 1700s, their idea of constitutionalism was, we have this idea of how government should be, and we want to put restrictions on it. Like, we want the Constitution to limit what government can do in the future, so that we're putting these restrictions on, so as time goes by, the government cannot break out of these restrictions and it cannot grow bigger out of these restrictions. Whereas the Charter of Rights had a different philosophy in the sense that it was giving government power to make changes in society. And that's, like we mentioned, John Crosby was talking about, that the Charter wasn't put in to limit the government's growth and authority. It was actually put in so that the government or the courts could make changes. Like, they had an ideal in mind of what they wanted, and the Charter would empower the courts to make changes in society in the future to make a different kind of society. So whereas the American Bill of Rights had been to protect an ideal of the way things were already, the Charter of Rights was to create changes in society rather than protect society from changes. So the Constitution in that sense was Americanized, and because of that, before the Charter was adopted, in some Canadian court cases, occasionally American court cases were referenced, because a Canadian judge is looking for precedents. And if he can't find something in Canada, he'll look to another common law jurisdiction, Britain or Australia or even the United States. But once the Charter was adopted, the percentage of court cases referencing American court cases dramatically increased, because now aspects of American law that had never applied to Canada before, now suddenly they were, because the Charter had made that kind of a change in the Constitution. Yeah, well, like I can't offer like a real solution per se, but like it's there. And so legally, like I don't think it's illegitimate to use it. Like when John Carpe and Jay Cameron and the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, when they go into court, they have to argue on the basis of the Charter, because that's what's there. Like, I don't like it, and I don't think it should be there, but that's the way it is. So I don't think it's illegitimate to use it, because that's what the government's using as a standard. So we're kind of stuck with that in the meantime. But I think it's better, though, if people realize what it is. Like, in terms of long-term change, people are not going to want to change the Charter unless they know what the problems are with the Charter. And so, like, I'm hoping that some of this material I've written, and maybe some of the videos or whatever, will help people understand that it's a problem, and that in the long term it will need to be replaced with something better. If we were to redesign a new Charter right now, it would probably be worse than what we have, because what was written in 82, I don't like that, and it's bad, but society has deteriorated over those years. So if we were just to try and say, well, let's have a brand new one right now, it would almost certainly be worse than what's there. So that wouldn't be a good strategy. The only way, for it to be replaced with something better in the future is for God to bring a revival. That's, the country has to change, because there won't be any political change that reflects good things unless there's first been change among the people who would support that. So yeah, there's too much precedent probably to do that, although I'd be willing to take the chance. See what happens. Because already with the Charter, like the Trinity Western decision was really important, because it's a Charter-based decision, and part of that decision was that it's okay to limit religious liberties for to achieve particular political goals, like secular political goals. And what that means is they're willing to limit Christian political freedom. This is it was a case specifically for Trinity Western, but it was already cited just a few days later in denying the injunction on the Bill 24 case, that John Carpe had launched. And so we know that Trinity Western decision is going to have ripple effects throughout the country on legal issues. And that's, the Trinity Western decision was based on the Charter, a particular interpretation of the Charter. And can't remember where I was going with that, but I guess it was because of the bad direction I see that the Charter is increasingly leading us into. That's why I'd be willing to rip it out and take a chance and see what would happen without it.